Welcome back to another video. We're out here at Staten Island Airfield, and today I'm going to be talking about RC cars once again because I've been doing a whole bunch of driving with the Traxxas TRX-4 2021 Bronco. It's the 10 scale crawler from Traxxas with its portal axles and all that fun stuff, and I really wanted to give you my opinion on it as a first 10 scale crawler. With that said, I wanted to let you know that I started crawling, or RC crawling, with a 1/24th scale, the SCX-24, the Jeep Wrangler. I got into it during COVID, when it seems like everybody else got into driving RC cars indoors. And through that, I really found an enjoyment in driving over obstacles slowly. It's such a weird thing to get so into. But honestly, it's like it scratched an itch that nothing else seems to scratch. And so after that, I wanted to try something a little bigger, something that I could bring out to the outdoors and crawl around, especially now having a son who seems to be super into remote control cars. I mean, what young kid isn't into stuff that drives around and rolls over rocks or looks like a monster truck? This felt like the perfect time to step up to a bigger crawler and see what fun can be had. After realizing I couldn't fit the 6th scale from Axial, the SCX-6 Jeep Wrangler, I decided that I was gonna go with the tried and true platform from Traxxas, which is the TRX-4. This is a platform that's been around for a long time. And after talking to the wonderful people at my local hobby shop, I decided on the Bronco body. It's kind of the newest and kind of latest and greatest of the bunch. And from everybody I've talked to, it's a really good beginner crawler. And even though I wouldn't consider myself a beginner, having spent so much time with the littler crawlers, I figured why not start with something basic. And so far, not to spoil the video, this is going to be related to pretty much all of the crawlers in that platform. I have driven now the Defender TRX-4, as well as I've driven the 6x6 G-Wagon one. That's not really included because it's a whole different beast slash animal. This is pretty much applying to any of the TRX-4 platforms. So if you decide you want to try the old school Bronco or that C10 version, go for it. They're pretty much all the same. From everybody I've talked to, the only difference is if you choose the high trail version, it has a little bit more clearance, ground clearance, approach. That's the right word, not approach. It has much better approach and departure angles, and also a little bit better breakover angle, which if you're not into off-road cars or anything like that, the breakover angle is the angle in between the front wheel and rear wheel. So like if you're driving over something, it's letting you know what you can drive over and not get hung up in the middle, which is called high centering. If you're not into cars, you're not into off-roading, probably don't know that, so I'm not going to assume you do. This is really going to focus on the regular version and not the high trail version. Some of this stuff is going to cross over, but know that that is there and that there is a difference between the regular TRX-4 and the TRX-4 high trail. And also you can get the high trail parts for the regular, but without further ado, let's get into it. Before I dive into the review of this truck, I want to talk about the chassis itself a little bit. And one of the biggest pros that I don't even mention in this video is the clipless body system. If you look up there, I don't know if you can see it right now, but to remove the body, there are just these 4 little clips underneath. Pull the body up and over. These little guys. So these little clips go into these little holes, and that's how the body's held on. So it's super easy to get on and off. So if you need to work on the truck, change the battery, whatever, it's a super simple system. When it comes to the truck itself, the chassis is well braced inside, really well put together. You can see the Pro Light Kit. I'm a little fanatic about my wire management, so everything is tucked tidy in there. Same goes on the truck side. I've got the trail light LEDs that shine down here and illuminate the wheel wells. All of them are cable managed throughout the entire vehicle. Everything plugged into this light controller, which again controls the whole Pro lighting kit, as well as the aux lighting kit. We have the receiver box, as well as the servo for the transmission and servo for the diff locks. We've got the motor, speed controller, and that pretty much rounds it out, and steering servos up here. But all in all, super good chassis. Full suspension in there. And then really quickly, really quickly, here you got the portal axles. So let me show you why portal axles are so useful when it comes to off-roading, or crawling in this case. This is a thing of Aquaphor diaper cream, and you can see it's about equal to the center of the wheel up top. Go under here, and you can see the center of the wheel is about here. So if this is a traditional axle, you wouldn't be able to drive over this diaper cream all the way under, because it would really be about here. If we look up here at the Bronco TRX-4M, there's the center of the wheel is right in the center of the axle. So if you look here under the pumpkin, I can fit just about this one finger underneath. But if you look over here, if this had portal axles, you could drive through 1, 2, maybe 2.5 of my fingers, so you'd nearly double the ground clearance. So this is a traditional straight axle. These are portal axles, where there's gearing down here that tuck the actual axle all the way up here. Starting off with the pros, honestly the biggest pro for any of the TRX-4s is their support. Their aftermarket support, their factory support from Traxxas. You can pretty much rebuild this thing from the ground up. You have tons of spare parts. They're super available. Every hobby shop, including GS Hobbies, which is my local hobby shop, they've got parts to fix it. They've got parts to upgrade it. They've got parts to pretty much do whatever you want. And I think that is such an advantage for the TRX-4. With crawlers, there are so many different ways to drive. There's so many different terrains, whether you're more on rocks or dirt, or you're in more of a wet environment. You can make that car your own and make that car really fit your driving style. That said, I would recommend, if you're new to crawling, start with it stock. I wouldn't change anything until you've gotten out and really driven it around, because you don't really necessarily know what's going to provide you the biggest bang for your buck when it comes to upgrades. In that same vein of upgrades, you also have stuff like lighting kits. I personally have the Pro Light kit on my TRX-4. It's the only upgrade I've really done to the truck, and I do think, I mean, it makes it look cool. It doesn't really provide any functionality, but it is super cool to see it driving around, especially if you go out later at night and you do like a late night trail drive. It does give a certain scale realism to it. Well, I think the aftermarket support is great, and probably the top reason to pick up a TRX-4. The best part of a TRX-4 for me is its performance out of the box. Out of the box, especially the Bronco version, can crawl up anything. Honestly, I've driven it straight up a tree before. Not very far, basically to the point where it would tip over, but that thing has got grip for days. It's got great departure angle. It's got great approach angle, which is the angle of something you can drive into and go up. And also its departure when you're leaving the flat and level. It's the steepness you can get to before the rear bumper touches. I hope that explained it. If I didn't explain it, somebody please do a better job down in the comments. Part of that performance is these things come stock with portal axles. A portal axle, instead of being a straight axle that connects the center of the two wheels, there's basically a gearing inside the hub that lifts the axle up. You'll see some B-roll right here. So that way the axle itself is actually above the center of the wheel. And that gives you a ton of extra ground clearance underneath the axle, and also gives you ground clearance close to the wheel itself. So when you're tucking it up, going over some really technical terrain, it won't get hung up, it won't scrape its axles, it won't get stuck. I think the portal axles make such a difference on this little crawler, and I'm so glad it has it out of the factory. So you don't have to set anything up. It is great out of the box. And that's, again, especially if you're newer to this truck, drive it stock. It's a super fun truck to drive stock, and it handles everything like a champ. It's not technically part of the performance, but one of the other things that I think is really great about the TRX-4 is the fact that it has cruise control. Basically, you push the set button on top while you have the throttle set, and while you're, say, walking on a straight portion of trail, you can have the truck more or less driving itself, as long as you've got the steering trimmed correctly. While this isn't a big deal, and some people might not even use this feature, I think when you're walking and doing like a trail walk with a TRX-4, it is super handy and super nice to have. It means you don't have to stop on the trail when you want to, say, take a drink from your water bottle or something like that. You can kind of keep moving down the trail in kind of a boring flat section, and you don't have to be actively managing the throttle. Obviously, you still have to steer, so do make sure your steering trims are set correctly so the truck drives straight, and great that it comes stock standard on this truck. Next one, this is kind of related to the performance of the truck, but the build quality overall is great. The parts choice, the materials used, it really does feel durable. From start to finish, from the wheels all the way to the top of the body, everything feels like it was put together thoughtfully, with intent, and really seems to provide some value for its price. And with this truck being $500 out of the gate, it does feel like a $500 truck. Next big pro for the TRX-4 is its realism. This thing looks like a full-size Bronco. It really nails that look, and it's even true with the smaller TRX-4M, which I do also have and I will eventually review. Promise you it's coming. The TRX-4s, pretty much all of them, have excellent licensed bodies. Not only are they durable, but they also look super scale. The Bronco's got the folding mirrors. It's got the little two, I think they're called peekaboos, I think. Text what they're actually called. But the little loops on the front, yes, they can be used as tie downs, but they're also like trail finders, so you know where the front of the car is when you're looking over the hood. Because again, lifted truck, when you're looking at the trail, you can't see the trail where you're putting your wheel, and so this basically allows you to see position wise where your wheel is, so it helps you line up on obstacles when you're crawling. Obviously for an RC crawler that doesn't matter, but the scale realism here is fantastic, even down to the headlights. The headlights themselves, the way they're cut out, the way they're set up, and the way the Pro Kit LEDs are set up, it looks like the real thing. So if you're into scale realism, if you're into scale driving, this thing nails that 100%. If you're not, it's a cool looking truck. That's kind of where it is. That feels like a pretty decent overview of the positives of this truck. It is a great scale truck. It performs excellent. It's got a huge aftermarket support. Now let's dive into some of the negatives of the truck. And this is going to be kind of a weird list because some of these aren't necessarily negatives. As a beginner driver, this thing does have a 2-speed transfer case, or a 2-speed transmission. You have basically a high gear and a low gear. And while I think that is fantastic for anybody off-road, and I do really appreciate it, I think this actually makes this truck a little too complicated for maybe the most beginner. Since you don't have to set it up, I think a beginner is fine with this 2-speed setup, and I think they will get used to it pretty quick and learn when to use low and when to use high gear. I think the sport version of this truck, which is I think $150 less at about $350, I think that actually might be the best beginner crawler, because it makes the TRX-4 just a little more simple, a little bit more distilled down, and a little bit more focused on just being a fantastic crawler, and a little bit less on the scale portion of what makes the Bronco, Defender, and other scale versions of this truck so special. In addition to being a little complicated for beginners, this also adds a little bit of complexity underneath the body. It means you have extra servos to orient the transmission to the right gear. And also because you have multiple locking differentials, you have another servo and another piece of complexity added underneath. I love the locking diffs. I love the ability to switch between, so you can gain more steering versus gain more traction. As a person who's into crawling already, I think these features are amazing. I really think it's a nice balance between expert and beginner for this truck. I think for a raw beginner though, this does become a slight negative, because again, it's adding complexity, it's adding something that can break, and it's adding something you may not necessarily know how to use out of the gate. But again, it's something you can grow into. So while I'm putting this in the negative category here, understand that that is going to be for each individual person. It's not necessarily a negative of the truck overall. Next negative is the price. While I think it is a fantastic value, it's expensive. I mean, again, you're kind of getting what you pay for here, but at $500, it is an expensive crawler. For $350, you get 80% of that experience with the TRX-4, the TX4 Sport, like the trail truck looking thing, picture here. And you also have options from other manufacturers that are cheaper than this, that give you most, if not the majority of the experience of the TRX-4. Personally, I do think the TRX-4 is worth that extra cost. I think the build quality, the aftermarket support, and all of the other things I mentioned in the pro category apply and do make this a value of a RC crawler. but it is still expensive. And right now, with budget conscious being so important to so many people, I cannot say there aren't better budget options when it comes to getting a 10th scale crawler. If your budget can't accommodate, I think this is a pretty big con. And that's why I think the TRX-4 Sport, which is about $350, and some of the other Axial products, Arma products, and other crawler manufacturers do provide some excellent value when it comes to good beginner crawlers in a 10th scale size. Sorry, I've got a bunch of these white little seed things blowing through, and one got in my mouth earlier and I can't get it out of my throat, so Next con is gonna be even weirder, because one of the things I think might be a con for this truck is the overwhelming options. And part of this is the overwhelming options of controls inside the truck, the differential, all the rest of that. But it's also the overwhelming number of parts and the number of people who offer upgrade lists that say, oh, these are things you must do to this truck out of the gate. I think out of the gate, this truck is fantastic. And if you're not already an expert crawler in RC, then I would recommend leaving your truck completely stock and ignoring all of it, because there are so many options for different wheels, different tires, different axle carriers, different hubs, different weights for locations, different scale accessories, all the rest of that stuff. It gets overwhelming really quick, and I think that is at some point a con. It is really hard to tone down all that noise and just focus and enjoy the truck itself. This is really weird to include, but I feel like I'm having to be a bit nitpicky, because other than the just cost of the truck itself, I don't think there are a ton of real cons to this truck. I think it's fantastic. There's a reason it's been around for a long time. Actual length of time this truck has been out over here, but it's been a long time, and Traxxas has really refined this thing down to be a fantastic vehicle. So yes, these are super nitpicky, some are a little weird, but hey, I feel like I can't just gush over this thing endlessly. And last but not least, this is a con for all Traxxas vehicles, and it is proprietary bits. While most of the stuff in here, fortunately, is actually not proprietary, so the servos are pretty stock standard size, all of the rest of the other parts are pretty interchangeable, and there's a ton of aftermarket accessories that are not Traxxas branded. Out of the gate with the warranty, this thing comes with the Traxxas battery plug. Fortunately, because you do have adapters and other stuff, you can make it a little bit less Traxxas, I don't know, a less proprietary for Traxxas, but out of the gate, this thing is proprietary Traxxas for its transmitter, proprietary for its batteries. So if you don't like buying Traxxas stuff out of the gate, you don't already have Traxxas stuff, and you don't want to be bothered changing out stuff to be a different receiver, or changing out to a different battery connector, this is a con for this truck, and it is a con for most Traxxas vehicles. But again, for a beginner, if you don't already have batteries, if you don't already have chargers, if you don't already have other remotes, receivers, stuff like that, it's not a big deal. But do know that this is standard Traxxas fare, and like with every other Traxxas vehicle, it comes with proprietary Traxxas bits. And that pretty much covers it for the TRX-4. I think as far as the beginner crawler goes, if you want to get into 10th scale and you've got the budget for it, fantastic option. If you don't have the budget for it, highly recommend looking at the TRX-4 Sport. If you want something that has a little bit more ground clearance, or you're doing a lot of water fording, highly recommend checking out the TRX-4 High Trail, which is basically just a suspension lift. And actually, that said, if you like the Bronco version, go check out the TRX-4, the suspension lift kit. You can basically turn any of the TRX-4s into high trail versions. That pretty much covers all of it. This is, again, a fantastic value in crawling. And if you're a beginner, definitely go check it out if you want to get into 10th scale RC crawling. It's a super fun hobby, gets you outdoors, gets you playing in the dirt, and what could be better? Down below are affiliate links. All of these links do support the channel. They are stuff that I recommend personally and I use personally. I would never just recommend something just to sell you something, but if you are going to Amazon and you're shopping, if you use my affiliate link, it does give the channel a little kickback, letting me purchase crazy stuff like this TRX-4 for this review. And as always, support your local hobby shop. Don't have affiliate links for those, but I would be remiss if I didn't say support small business, because they're our community. Thank you all for joining me. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.